Let's begin with something uncomfortable. What if who you think you are is nothing more than a mask, carefully constructed to hide what you truly carry inside? Jung called it the persona, but behind it, there is something far more dangerous: the forbidden archetype. Unlike the socially accepted roles, student, worker, parent, this archetype doesn't fit. It doesn't want to fit. It disrupts, disturbs, unsettles. And maybe, without even realizing it, you've been carrying one your entire life. That strange feeling of being other, of seeing patterns nobody else notices, of being both admired and feared. People don't talk about it, because naming it would expose it. But your body knows. Your dreams know. And if you've ever felt haunted by yourself, it's not because you're broken, it's because your archetype is forbidden, yet alive, waiting to break free. Here's the paradox. Society doesn't hate your archetype because it's evil. It hates it because it's true. It reveals too much. It unmasks illusions people would rather keep untouched. That's why you feel like your very presence unsettles others. They don't need you to speak. They feel it. They sense you carry something ancient, something raw, something that refuses to submit. Jung believed each person embodies archetypes, but some are labeled dangerous. The prophet who speaks truths no one wants to hear, the outlaw who resists conformity, the seer who perceives what lies beneath appearances. If you've been accused of being too intense, too dramatic, too much, chances are you've been revealing your archetype unconsciously. And here's the unsettling part. Repressing it doesn't kill it. It only makes it louder, twisting into compulsions, obsessions, and self-destruction. What you hide becomes what hunts you. So how do you know if you carry one of these forbidden archetypes? You don't find out by choice. It reveals itself through discomfort, through being unable to adapt to normal life without feeling drained, through questioning truths everyone else accepts blindly, through dreaming things that later happen, through feeling emotions so raw and overwhelming you can't contain them, and people will call you unstable, dramatic, broken, but they're wrong. You are not malfunctioning. You're decoding reality differently. Your psyche is not aligned with collective programming. It's tuned into deeper currents that frighten those who rely on the surface. And that frightens even you because it means you'll never be able to live half asleep like others. Once awakened, you can't go back. That's the curse and the gift. Let's start unveiling the signs. And I warn you, they won't be comfortable to hear, because each of them reveals not something you'd brag about, but something you've probably tried to bury for years. The first sign is disconnection from belonging. You've always felt out of place, at school, at home, at work. It's not shyness, not insecurity. It's the feeling of being a guest in a play you didn't audition for. You watch others immerse in routines, parties, ambitions, gossip, and you feel the absurdity of it all, like you're playing along but can't shake the suspicion that none of it matters. That deep estrangement is the fingerprint of a forbidden archetype. You don't belong because you were never supposed to. Your role is not to merge, but to disrupt, and disruption comes at a cost. The second sign is unbearable sensitivity. When you carry a forbidden archetype, you don't process reality like others. Words cut deeper. Silences weigh more. Injustices feel unbearable. While others scroll through tragedies with numb detachment, you can't. You absorb the collective wound as if it were your own. Your nervous system lives on high alert, constantly decoding signals people don't notice. And while sensitivity is often framed as weakness, in Jungian terms, it's raw power. You're porous to the unconscious. You channel emotions that don't even belong to you. That's why you often feel exhausted after social interactions, why you need to isolate just to breathe. You're not fragile, you're overloaded. Your archetype wasn't built to survive in shallow waters. It was built to drown and resurface with truth. The third sign is compulsive rebellion. You don't follow rules simply because they're rules. You question, resist, challenge. Not because you enjoy chaos, but because your archetype doesn't bow to hollow authority. From childhood, you probably resisted being told what to do without explanation. Teachers called you difficult, parents said you were stubborn, bosses see you as non-compliant. But inside, you know you're not rebelling against discipline, you're rebelling against lies. Jung wrote that the outlaw archetype emerges when collective systems grow too corrupt to bear, and if you carry it, you'll find it impossible to tolerate hypocrisy. You will be punished for it. You may lose friends, jobs, approval, but rebellion is not your choice. It's your design. And repressing it will only turn it inward, making you rebel against yourself. The fourth sign is prophetic perception. Sounds mystical, but it's not magic. It's pattern recognition at a depth most can't handle. You notice shifts in people's tone, subtle inconsistencies in their words, movements in culture long before others catch up. You say things others dismiss, only for them to later realize you were right. But here's the cost. People don't thank prophets. They crucify them. They call you paranoid, pessimistic, crazy. Yet your archetype keeps whispering, insisting you can't unsee what you see. This is why many with prophetic archetypes suffer from loneliness, because speaking the truth feels like social suicide, and staying silent feels like betraying yourself. You walk that razor's edge, always too early for others, always too heavy for yourself. That tension is the essence of your role. The fifth sign is destructive cycles. You sabotage relationships, projects, opportunities. Just when things seem stable, outsiders call it immaturity. But here's the truth. Your archetype doesn't let you settle for illusions. Comfort feels like a trap. Stability feels like suffocation. So unconsciously, you break what isn't aligned, even if it hurts. Jung said archetypes don't negotiate with the ego. They demand integration. If you're living inauthentically, your forbidden archetype will collapse everything until you listen. That's why you may find yourself repeating toxic relationships, addictions, compulsions, not because you enjoy pain, but because your psyche is screaming, this isn't you. Destruction is not the end, it's initiation. And the faster you accept that your chaos is purposeful, the faster you can move from endless collapse into conscious creation. The sixth sign is unbearable authenticity. You cannot pretend for long. Masks suffocate you. Small talk drains you. When you try to play normal, your body revolts. Anxiety, depression, exhaustion. People may admire your honesty, but secretly, they're afraid of it. Because you don't just tell truths, you embody them, and that forces others to confront themselves. That's why your relationships often feel unstable. People are drawn to your intensity, but eventually recoil because it mirrors what they repress. You might wonder why you ruin connections, but you're not ruining them, you're unmasking them. Your archetype demands realness, even if it costs you comfort, approval, or love. And once you stop apologizing for that, you'll realize you weren't made to please, you were made to awaken. And finally, the seventh sign. Ancestral burden. The forbidden archetype doesn't start with you, you inherit it. From your family's unspoken traumas, their silenced wounds, their survival patterns. You carry what they couldn't resolve. That's why sometimes your emotions feel too big for your story, why your fears don't match your life events, you're processing ghosts. Jung said we're all shaped by the collective unconscious, and when you carry a forbidden archetype, you embody not just your pain, but your lineages. This is why your journey feels so heavy, because it's not only yours. You're breaking cycles that have been running for generations, and that's why your life feels both cursed and destined at the same time. You didn't choose this, but you are chosen. Now let's go deeper. What happens when you finally stop running from this archetype? At first, chaos intensifies. The illusions collapse faster. Relationships end abruptly. Habits you used to control spin out of control. This is the purge. It feels like madness, but it's actually alignment. Your psyche is clearing space for authenticity. Most people give up here, returning to numbing behaviors, distractions, denial. But if you endure, if you let the old self die, something extraordinary happens. The archetype stops being your enemy. It becomes your compass. Your rebellion turns into vision, your sensitivity into wisdom, your destruction into creation. And you finally realize what Jung meant. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But let's be brutally honest. This path is not glamorous. It's lonely. It's disorienting. You'll lose people who can't handle your intensity. You'll abandon careers that don't fit. You'll shed identities that once felt safe. And in that shedding, you'll feel like nothing, like nobody. This void terrifies most, which is why they go back to masks. But if you dare to stay there, raw, naked, undefined, you'll encounter the essence of your archetype, and it won't look like light. It will look like darkness, rage, grief, unbearable truth. But that's the doorway. The archetype reveals itself in shadow first, because only by facing what you fear can you integrate what you are, and integration is the only way out. So here's the uncomfortable conclusion. Carrying a forbidden archetype means you were never meant for an easy life. You were meant for a true life. Jung didn't promise comfort, he promised wholeness. And wholeness is violent because it tears apart illusions you've mistaken for safety. If you've resonated with these signs, if you've felt the exile, the sensitivity, the rebellion, the prophecy, the cycles, the authenticity, the burden, then you already know you are not like others. Your archetype is not normal. It's rare, it's dangerous, and it's necessary, because without those who carry the forbidden, humanity would stay asleep forever. Your pain is not punishment, it's initiation. The only question that remains is, will you dare to live it fully, or will you keep running, calling it fate? Let's address the illusion of control. You probably think you can manage your archetype with discipline, affirmations, positive thinking, but you've noticed it doesn't work, right? That's because forbidden archetypes don't respond to force. They respond to presence. When you resist them, they mutate into addictions, obsessions, or panic attacks. But when you allow them, when you sit with the discomfort, something strange happens. They calm down. They reveal messages hidden in the chaos. That's why Jung insisted on dialogue with the unconscious. Your archetype doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to be heard. The more you treat it like an enemy, the louder it screams. But when you listen, it transforms from a destructive storm into a guiding current. That's not weakness. That's initiation. Now let's talk about relationships. Carrying a forbidden archetype changes the way you bond. You crave depth, intensity, truth. Small talk feels meaningless. Shallow connections drain you. But here's the paradox. The same intensity that attracts people also pushes them away. They want your fire until it burns their illusions, and this leaves you in cycles of profound connection followed by painful disconnection. Many with forbidden archetypes feel cursed in love, constantly repeating heartbreaks. But here's the truth. You don't fail in relationships. You reveal them. You expose the masks others wear, and most aren't ready for that. So you're left carrying the wound of rejection, when in reality, rejection isn't of you. It's of the truth you embody. The sooner you see this, the freer you become. Another difficult truth: success will never feel the same for you. While others chase recognition, wealth, or approval, those things feel strangely empty. You can achieve them, but they don't satisfy. Because your archetype isn't fueled by achievement, it's fueled by meaning. That's why you constantly shift paths, abandon careers, destroy what looks perfect from the outside. People call you inconsistent, restless, unstable. But the reality is, your forbidden archetype won't let you sell your soul for applause. You will only feel alive when your work aligns with your essence. And yes, That means sacrifice. It means walking away from stability others would kill for. But it also means something few ever taste: authenticity. And authenticity is worth more than any form of success that feels hollow. Let's dive into the body, because forbidden archetypes don't only live in the mind, they live in your nervous system. Chronic tension, random anxiety, exhaustion that sleep can't cure, these aren't signs of weakness. They're signs of an overloaded system carrying truths it hasn't expressed. Every time you silence your archetype, your body takes the weight. That's why trauma isn't only psychological, it's somatic. Your archetype screams through migraines, digestive issues, insomnia. Western culture tells you to medicate, to suppress symptoms. But Jung would tell you, listen, your body is the unconscious made flesh. Every ache, every restlessness, every sudden burst of emotion is a message. And if you learn to read them instead of fear them, you'll discover that your body is not betraying you. It's guiding you. Now, the hardest part, family. Jung believed we inherit not just physical traits, but psychic patterns. If you carry a forbidden archetype, you're probably the black sheep of your family, the one who doesn't follow traditions, who questions what others accept, who refuses to stay silent. And you've been punished for it, through guilt, shame, rejection. But here's the hidden layer. You didn't just choose rebellion. You were chosen by your lineage. Families unconsciously assign the task of carrying unresolved wounds to one member, and that's you. You're not cursed, you're the breaker of cycles. But breaking cycles feels like betrayal. Saying no to patterns your ancestors survived on feels like turning against them. Yet in truth, you're honoring them because you're ending what hurt them. That is sacred work. But sacred work doesn't feel sacred. It feels lonely, because while you're breaking patterns, others are protecting them. You'll be accused of selfishness for setting boundaries, of arrogance for following your own path, of ingratitude for refusing roles. And this rejection cuts deep, because forbidden archetypes crave belonging, yet rarely find it in family. But here's the liberation. Belonging is not where you were born. It's where you are seen. And you will not find that everywhere. You will find it in fragments, in certain friendships, in moments of art, in fleeting encounters. And that must be enough until you build a new kind of tribe. Because the truth is, your archetype was never meant to belong to the old system. It was meant to create a new one. Let's explore another trap. Self-deception. You might think you've worked on yourself. You've read books, meditated, journaled, and yet the same patterns repeat. Why? Because intellectual work doesn't reach archetypal depth. Jung said the unconscious speaks in symbols, dreams, impulses, not in logic. That's why forbidden archetypes don't dissolve through theories. They dissolve through integration, through living what you fear most. That means stepping into conflict instead of avoiding it. Feeling grief instead of distracting from it, facing rage instead of suppressing it. It's not about talking about shadow work, it's about embodying it, until your forbidden archetype isn't something haunting you, but something walking beside you. And only then will your healing stop being intellectual and become real. And here's another sign few mention. Time feels different for you. You're not motivated by short-term goals. You see life as an unfolding myth, not a checklist. That's why you often feel behind others. They're buying houses, climbing careers, raising families, while you're still searching. But your search is not failure. It's fidelity to your archetype. Because your life isn't linear. It's spiral. You revisit lessons, descend into chaos, rise transformed, only to descend again. This rhythm isn't laziness. It's archetypal. Prophets, mystics, creators all lived non-linear lives. Their timing didn't match society, but it matched destiny. So if you feel late, remember, forbidden archetypes aren't late. They're timeless. Your path is not about keeping up. It's about keeping true. Now let's shatter a dangerous belief that understanding your archetype will make life easy. It won't. Awareness doesn't remove pain, it refines it. You'll still fall into cycles, you'll still feel rejected, you'll still crave what hurts you. But the difference is, you'll stop confusing it with failure. You'll see patterns as part of the dance. You'll stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "What is this teaching me?" That shift changes everything, because instead of seeing yourself as broken, you see yourself as becoming. And when you stop demanding perfection, you stop sabotaging progress. Growth doesn't mean you stop falling. It means you fall consciously. You see the fall, you accept it, and you rise quicker. That's maturity, not the absence of wounds, but the presence of wisdom. Let's talk about creativity. Forbidden archetypes are creators by nature, but not all create art. Some create movements, new ways of thinking, new forms of living. Creativity here is not a hobby, it's survival. Because if you don't channel the raw energy of your archetype into creation, it consumes you. That's why so many sensitive, intense people fall into addiction, depression, or self-destruction. It's not because they lack discipline. It's because their archetype's fire has nowhere to go. When you write, paint, build, protest, invent, you're not just expressing yourself. You're transmuting. You're turning unbearable weight into something that can be carried, and sometimes into something that changes the world. Creativity is not optional for you. It's medicine. But creativity requires sacrifice. You'll never be able to create freely if you're obsessed with approval. Forbidden archetypes always clash with collective taste. Your art will be called too dark, too strange, too uncomfortable. Your ideas too radical, too unrealistic, too naive. But that's exactly the point. You're not here to confirm what people already know. You're here to disturb, to awaken, to push. And yes, you will be misunderstood. Yes, you will be mocked. But history shows us, every archetype that carried forbidden truths was mocked, until time proved them right. So the question isn't whether people approve. The question is whether you can survive disapproval long enough to fulfill your role, because your archetype doesn't exist for applause. It exists for transformation. Now we must address fear. The fear that if you live your archetype fully, you'll lose everything: love, safety, stability. And you might. That fear is real. But here's the paradox. Repressing your archetype makes you lose even more, because you lose yourself. You live half dead, pretending, adjusting, pleasing. You survive, but you don't live. So the real risk is not unleashing your archetype. The real risk is silencing it. Because silence doesn't bring peace. It brings erosion. Slowly, you disappear under layers of masks until one day you don't recognize yourself. And that's the true tragedy, living without ever meeting who you really are. Compared to that, losing approval is nothing. Compared to that, rejection is freedom. So the real danger isn't living too much. It's living too little. Another trap, comparison. You look at others' lives and wonder why everything seems easier for them, why they can commit, settle, enjoy simple pleasures without collapse. You envy their normalcy. But Jung would tell you, stop comparing vertical lives to spiral lives. Their path isn't harder or easier, it's different. They came to sustain, you came to disrupt. They preserve the structure, you crack it open. And yes, that means more chaos, more loneliness, more depth, but it also means more transformation. You are not here to live like others, you're here to show another way of living is possible. And that requires carrying contradictions, walking alone, enduring ridicule. So instead of asking, why can't I be normal? Ask, why was I given this fire? That question unlocks everything. Let's confront rage. Many with forbidden archetypes feel an undercurrent of anger they can't explain. Society calls it moodiness, volatility. But rage is not random. It's repressed truth. Every time you silence yourself, every time you betray your needs, every time you endure injustice quietly, rage builds. And if ignored, it explodes destructively, against others, against yourself. But rage, like all archetypal energy, is sacred. It's fuel. It reveals where your boundaries have been violated, where your soul refuses compromise. Learning to channel rage consciously into art, activism, expression, transforms it from poison into fire. And once you stop fearing your rage, you stop fearing your power. Because beneath your anger lies the exact same thing, your forbidden truth, demanding to be honored. Grief is another companion. Not just grief for losses, but existential grief. For the gap between the world as it is and the world as you sense it could be. This grief can feel unbearable, a weight on your chest you can't shake. You try to numb it, escape it, explain it. But grief doesn't need explanation. It needs expression, tears, silence, art, movement, anything that lets it breathe. Because grief is not only sadness, it's love that has nowhere to go. And when you give it space, it transforms. It becomes compassion. It deepens your humanity. Jung said that people with deep archetypal burdens often carry collective grief. And if you felt sadness too vast for your personal story, that's why. You're grieving not just your life, but life itself. Here's something even darker. Forbidden archetypes often flirt with self-destruction, not because they want death, but because they crave rebirth. Normal lives don't satisfy, so the unconscious tempts with extremes, addiction, recklessness, despair. It's not about ending life, it's about ending the false self. But many confuse the two. They destroy themselves instead of destroying the mask. If this resonates with you, hear this clearly. You're not meant to die. You're meant to live differently. The archetype pushing you to the edge isn't asking for your death. It's asking for your transformation. And once you understand that, once you let part of you die without killing yourself, you begin the most sacred process of all, rebirth. That's the true purpose of destruction, not annihilation, resurrection. Now let's talk about wholeness. Jung's central idea was individuation, the integration of all parts of yourself, light and dark, conscious and unconscious. For forbidden archetypes, individuation isn't optional, it's survival. Because repressing your truth will always lead to collapse. Integration means admitting what you deny, your rage, your grief, your desires, your need for recognition, your craving for solitude. It means letting the archetype walk beside you, not behind you. And this doesn't make life easier, but it makes it yours. Once you integrate, you no longer sabotage blindly. You no longer mistake your impulses for weakness. You see them as signals. You begin to live with a kind of brutal honesty. And though it costs you comfort, it gives you something far greater: inner authority. Integration also changes how you see others. Instead of resenting their rejection, you understand it. They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting their own shadows reflected in you. Instead of demanding recognition, you recognize yourself. Instead of craving saviors, you become your own anchor. This doesn't mean you stop needing people. It means you stop needing approval. Relationships shift from dependency to authenticity. Work shifts from survival to purpose. And slowly, you realize something shocking. Your forbidden archetype was never the enemy. It was the map. Every collapse, every heartbreak, every rebellion. It wasn't chaos. It was choreography. It was leading you here, to the point where you no longer run, where you no longer apologize, where you finally stand as who you are. But let's destroy one last illusion, that once integrated, you'll never fall again. Wrong. You'll keep falling. You'll keep doubting, sabotaging, fearing. Because growth doesn't mean perfection. It means awareness. The difference is now you fall consciously. You catch yourself sooner. You don't spiral as far. You don't mistake relapse for failure. You see it as rhythm. Falling, rising, falling, rising. That's the dance of archetypal lives. And when you stop demanding to always be healed, you actually heal, because healing isn't about never hurting. It's about not abandoning yourself when you do. That's the true revolution, not escaping the cycle, but inhabiting it with presence. That's what makes you unbreakable, not because you never break, but because you always rebuild. Now the uncomfortable invitation: stop running. Stop hiding your intensity, your strangeness, your grief. Stop apologizing for being too much. Stop trying to prove you're normal. You're not. You never were. And that's your gift. The world doesn't need more normal. It needs more awake. And awakeness is uncomfortable. It exposes illusions, breaks cycles, shatters masks. That's why you feel like a threat. That's why people recoil. But that's also why you're here, to embody what others repress, to speak what others silence, to carry what others bury. It's not punishment, it's purpose. And if you dare to live it, you'll discover something you've never truly felt: freedom. Not the shallow freedom of doing what you want, the deep freedom of being what you are. So let me ask you directly, who would you be if you stopped fighting yourself? If you stopped treating your archetype as an enemy and started treating it as your greatest teacher? If you stopped sabotaging what you love because peace feels unfamiliar and instead allowed yourself to inhabit peace fully, even when it scares you? Who would you be if you dared to belong nowhere, so you could finally belong to yourself? That's the question your archetype asks you every day, in every impulse, in every collapse. And until you answer it, you'll keep circling. But once you do, once you dare to live the answer, your life will stop being a cycle of avoidance and start being a path of awakening. That's the moment everything changes. So if you've made it this far, let me say this: it's no accident. If these words pierced you, unsettled you, mirrored you, it's because you're forbidden. Archetype is awake, and it's tired of waiting. This isn't just another video. It's a mirror, a reminder that what you've been fearing is exactly what you've been seeking, and now you have a choice. Will you keep numbing, pretending, delaying, or will you dare to turn toward the fire and see what it's been trying to show you all along? Remember, your shadow doesn't want to kill you. It wants to free you, and your archetype isn't your curse. It's your compass. The question is not whether it's real. The question is whether you're ready to live it. The abyss or awakening, you choose.